How do you get off of a sandworm?
I don't care, is what I decided. Anytime anyone has asked the question, how do we get the palanquin? Jessica was on the sand. I don't care. I don't give a shit because I want to believe this story. I enjoy it. It's really, really good. And it doesn't matter to me. I think probably they can control the sandworm. So
they just slow it down.
Right. They slow it down. Yeah. They press the brake pedal and they hop off.
Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this is Welcome to the Writer's Room, the show where we analyze media in various forms and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we are talking about Dune Part 2, which premiered this year in 2024.
Are you ready for a summary?
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Lisan al-Gaib.
After the destruction of House Atreides by House Harkonnen, Paul and Jessica are traveling with the Fremen. Some believe Paul to be the Lisan al-Gaib, while others believe he's just a foreigner. Jessica is told in order to live, she must become the Reverend Mother and does so by drinking a poison from the sandworms. She survives, furthering the belief in the prophecy. Paul begins to fight alongside the Fremen after learning their ways from Chani, the Fremen woman who Paul saw in his visions. The two continue to get closer and develop a romantic relationship. As the Harkonnens tried to continue spice harvesting, the Fremen with Paul, who takes on the name Maud Adib, or Desert Mouse, greatly disrupts the Harkonnens' harvesting. Jessica continues spreading the Lisan al-Gaib narrative and travels south to the fundamentalists there. Eventually, Feyd-Rautha, a psychotic Harkonnen, is put in charge of Arrakis and decides to destroy the North Siege Paul has been staying at. This is devastating to the Fremen, who decide they must move south. Paul, having been seeing visions of a holy war he begins, has refused to travel south, until now seeing that he must drink the water of life to know his past before he can know his future. He goes south and drinks. Chani, who is fully against the prophecy, is forced by Jessica to save Paul from the worm's poison. Paul realizes he is the grandson of Vladimir Harkonnen and decides he will use the Fremen to avenge House Atreides. He goes to the council meeting and persuades the entire South to join his cause. Paul and his army of Fremen soldiers invite the Emperor to Arrakis and lay siege to House Harkonnen and the Emperor's men. Paul duels with Feyd-Rautha, wins, and says he will take the Emperor's daughter, who is also a Bene Gesserit, to marry him and rule together. The movie ends with the great houses arriving, saying they will not honor Paul's ascension, and the Holy War has begun.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a
lot.
Huge, huge story.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're like big fans. This is the third time we've seen this movie.
Yes.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I cried like 6 times.
I think it's great. I remember everything that I was looking forward to, like everything that stuck with me from previous watches was just as good. Mm-hmm. And there was stuff that I forgot that was also great. Right.
Or stuff that I didn't realize how impactful it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think same with this one. Like the first one, we talked about how you kind of notice more details, you pick up more of the story because it is so vast and it's based on a book. There's definitely like on a third watch, there's things that I still picked up that I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
I didn't read the book though, so that's probably part of it.
Gotcha. At the same time, I think it does the same thing the first movie did where like the opening's a really good example. We'll have a POV where somebody's just telling us facts that we need to know about things, which is sort of like a recap of the first movie, while the visuals are showing us other things, either further like details about what is being said or something that relates to it in some way. So that throughout the entire movie just made the pacing feel super fast, but very understandable at the same time, because it's like using like 2 senses at once, almost like you're hearing what's happening as you're seeing what's happening, and it's really clean.
So we'll like go in order and kind of like stop and start and talk about certain concepts that we want to talk about as we go, as they come up. So it starts with Florence Pugh, who is basically, she's like doing this voice diary, which I think was a really strong idea. Are there other POVs in the books at all?
I don't remember.
Okay. So Florence Pugh plays the Emperor's daughter, and as she's sort of like doing this diary, she does this a few times in the book. I think it's really, or in the movie, I think it's really clever to have her start the show and give exposition this way. She basically just talks about how House Harkonnen utterly destroyed House Atreides, and she talks about how the Emperor feels about it. And she says, he's not the same, but he said absolutely nothing about it. And he loved Leto Atreides like a son, which was kind of crazy. But basically, power was more important to him.
Mm-hmm.
And she says the darkest secret of Arrakis is the end of House Atreides.
Yeah, something I took a quote from the thing. She was like, nobody knew this was going to happen. It came out of nowhere. in a single night, all the Atreides were wiped out. They all died in the dark, which was really cool. And they overcut that with like all the Harkonnen people now overtaken Arrakeen again, like burning all the bodies.
Yeah. Yes. I think it was just a really clever way to start the movie and remind us like the most important thing that has happened to lead us to where we are exactly. Because it kind of picks up right where it left off for the most part. So we see Paul talking. It's kind of like a vision or a dream. He's talking to like the fetus, the baby that Jessica has. It opens on an eclipse, and the Harkonnen soldiers are there, and everything is like orange and beautiful. The Fremen go left, Jessica and Paul go right, and it just becomes this like fight. It's really cool. So once they see that they're calling this worm, the Harkonnen soldiers like float up to the cliffside and then start getting like shot one by one by the Fremen, and just like their bodies start plummeting off the cliff and like hitting the ground in front of Jessica and Paul. And the music, this is like the true opening, right? Like you kind of have the like prologue, the exposition you get. And so like I think this is just a really cool way to remind you of the like brutality of the world that we're in, and the ways of the Fremen people and sort of what they're fighting. When they start floating, I remember being like amazed in the theater when I saw this the first time, because they start floating up to the cliff and the music goes like, wow, it's like sinister and terrifying, and the body's like falling, and then someone who's like not dead, he like lands in front of Jessica and Paul has this like mad dash to get the knife and like fights, and then there's another soldier and Jessica clubs him to death with a rock in like right in front of the eclipse on like a sand dune, clubs him to death, and she's like, never stand on with your back to the enemy. And it's just like we're immediately transported right back into like who Paul is, who Jessica is. Even like Chani wakes up right next to Paul. So we're getting all these faces that are like really important. We see Stilgar again immediately. So it's a really good way to just like start this out. And it's just like epic. Like it's so cool and looks so cool.
I agree. I think I wrote on all the same stuff. I think throughout the movie, just the different colors of Arrakis are so cool. And I think we get more colors and more like visuals of the planet as we like venture deeper and like Paul learns the ways more, but specifically as he spends more time with Chani, right? Like one of their first big scenes together is just talking about how beautiful the planet is, and then we start to see it in these really nice lush colors, and especially later contrasted with the literal black and white of the Harkonnen homeworld. Like I think they did such a meaningful job, because I feel like it would be really easy to just make the desert one sort of place, you know? But I feel like it's so many different places because of that. The opening, same thing. I really like, not only did the music like take you in, but I also really dug, like there weren't a lot of words said in this opening. Like more people died than like sentences were spoken, which is really cool.
I also think starting with the eclipse, whether it's in the book or not, an eclipse is like a symbol of like a new beginning a lot of the times. And I think it was just really cool with like reminding us sort of like Paul is on this journey of this new beginning where he's going to like transform. And that's eclipses like mean transformation and things like that. So I think just even the symbolism of the eclipse, and of course the like lighting dynamics, like it would get darker and then lighter. It was very, very cool. And I think like added to the symbolism.
Yeah, I agree. And it feels, I kept saying this throughout the movie too, everything feels like such a classic sci-fi thing to happen.
Yeah.
Like if you're reading an old like serial, this is definitely like the camp out, mess up the plans, leave sort of thing, where it like is not necessarily connected to everything else. But I thought what made it sort of elevated was that everybody's actions sort of did foreshadow what was happening. Right. So when the person lands next to Paul and Jessica, Paul runs for the knife, right? He's headlong, he's proud, he's running into things. Jessica's very hesitant to do things, but at the same time is, because of that hesitancy, is more like aware. So is protective of Paul, which like reflects further down the line, specifically in the War Council meeting, I think, when Paul runs in and Jessica's even telling him to slow down. Right. The only difference is that like now Paul can fully see, you know? And I just think it's cool. Like, again, without really saying anything, it's foreshadowing like what these characters are all about. You know,
Right.
even Stilgar like protecting Paul, saying to stay here, we're gonna take care of it
Right.
throughout the entire thing. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. I think it was just a fantastic way to open it.
Mm-hmm.
So then right after they sort of like win this little battle, Paul thinks that he's the one they're after, and it's Stilgar's basically like, that's not true. Only Fremen can survive this far. They want the Fremen. And then they start taking the water from the dead bodies. And this was very cool. And I get how it was like gross. And he basically calls their water like dirty, but he says like, we'll still use it.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I thought it like, again, just like a couple sentences, not really explaining what it does because we can put it together.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like cool world building. Like, yeah, they got like water takeout machines. Like that makes sense. You know?
And then like Chani takes the water while he's still alive.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I think this is cool. Chani, I think even in like from when we met her in movie 1 to now, for the first like hour of this movie, the only thing she kind of says is like, they will fight well, you fought well, something about fighting well.
Yeah.
And I just, one, is kind of funny, but two, I think it just establishes that she very much respects the culture, or that's like a Fremen thing as well, I would guess. It's just like fighting is very important to these people, and specifically Chani, and she respects that, and I think she like sees that in Paul, and that's probably part of the reason she like does respect him.
Yeah, and I think it works. Like their chemistry is really, really good, especially when they get further into their relationship. But it is funny, like they're sort of giving each other one-liners, but nobody's laughing and nothing is funny.
Yeah. You know? So then we see the Harkonnens on Arrakis, and it's like, even on Arrakis, everything's just black and white, basically. And they're losing men to the desert. But Robin? It's not Robin, it's like
I think
Robin.
it's Raban.
Raban. Dave Bautista's character.
Yeah.
To be clear, he calls the Fremen rats, and he says they're losing people to the Fremen. And then he like literally kills the guy right there, which I think the goal is just to like remind you who the Harkonnens are again.
Yeah, I wish I would have kept a head count of how many times named Harkonnen just randomly killed somebody next to them.
Right.
Because I think like I get it. Like it's like, oh, they don't care. They want to kill their own people. But at some point it's like there's diminishing returns, right? Like he gets at least one. I think Fade gets 2. Like
Fade gets at least like 4. I think Fade Rotha gets like 4. And I think he gets at least 2 because he kills the guy in the plane. I didn't mind it so much. I think it was fine.
I just think it happened a lot. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah,
you know,
I see what you're saying.
Unstable. I like how they showed the Harkonnen tech. Like you get this like virtual map of like the world or whatever, and it's all lit up, which is cool. And they have these, I don't know what they're doing, but they're like all chanting.
I know. I'm like trying to figure out how they're using that with the technology, but it was very cool.
I'm still firm on my stance. I think Dave Bautista does a bad job in this movie too. And I think I narrowed it down. I don't think I mind that he yells, because I like that his character is really angry, because you see with somebody like Fade, he is just insecure. But I think my problem is he's either absolutely whispering or absolutely yelling. And there's absolutely no in between. There's never any ramp up. It is just one or the other, and they're both really boring to me. Yeah,
because I do think he did yell a lot in this movie.
And I don't know. It could come down to like maybe there was something in like analyzing the character that wasn't there. Because like I've seen Dave Bautista act in roles that I like.
Yeah.
You know, like I wouldn't say he's a bad actor, but I do think this is a bad performance.
I just think they're trying to give him something different and contrast Fade Rotha.
Yeah.
And show the like brutality. I guess the way to do that is because he needs to be powerful, but not too powerful, you know?
Yeah.
And like not smart. So I do get that was like a tricky thing to find a balance of. But yeah, I feel like just all in all, he just needed levels.
For sure.
You know, because clearly these people do respect him and fear him.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need to yell all the time. You know, or maybe it's that people needed to like react more to his yelling. Like he yells right before he kills or something. And so it's like when he yells, everyone's like scattering or something.
That makes sense.
Could have just given it more like depth. In a movie that has so much depth and such specificity, I think it just stands out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So then they arrive at the siege, And I thought it was really cool because the set design of this is it's got all these windows for light, and because you can't light a fire on Arrakis, right? You don't want anything else that's going to bring more heat. So they don't have like torches and things like that. It's just all these windows. And it just, the details in the set design was really, it just helped to tell the narrative, and it like fits so well. And they enter, Paul and Jessica, and people are like yelling, and they're in this sea of people. And I thought this was really cool because to me, it parallels the end scene where he's walking through the people and they're just like parting ways for him.
Yeah.
And this is them like half the people are yelling, half the people are like worshiping him. Or it's really more like just a few people are worshiping him. But like most people are basically like calling him names and jeering at him and like upset that Jamis has died. And I just thought it was a cool parallel.
Yeah, I think it's neat. Like it picks up right where the last movie left off. So they're bringing Jamis's body into like to be like sacrificially like put to rest or whatever. So like they're seeing their friend's dead body and then their killer walk in the door also, which is cool. And yeah, I don't know. I liked they do this a couple times where there's scenes and it's very claustrophobic. It's very like aggressive to watch, and something will shift. In this case, it was like fighting to praying. And I just think it does a super good job of bringing you into sort of not Paul's mindset, because he's sort of plotting throughout this, but like it feels like I'm weirdly there, you know, like I feel disoriented, especially seeing this in theaters. I remember that being a huge, like every tiny thing like that was like a moment of revelation. It was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. How do they do that?
Yeah, I think they also did a really good job of making Paul a good person because he needs to have somewhere to like grow. Yeah. And so I think that's also another reason why Chani respects him, because he does things like he's like, I'm going to carry Jamis, right? And there's little things he does that make him feel so redeemable and likable as a person.
You don't realize he's turning evil.
And Stilgar's at like this elders or this council type meeting. And basically they don't believe Paul is the lease on Al Gaif, but Stilgar literally says he will pledge his life for him. And they need a Reverend Mother, and Jessica can be that Reverend Mother. And that's their plan. Yeah. And they say about Paul, the desert will handle his faith.
Yeah. I think this scene, like watching it again and again, I feel like this scene carries more and more importance each time with it, because we learn a lot. Like this like elder council, Stilgar's like, I think he's the one, and you're like, we're going in like, oh shit, that's crazy, but they're like, again, and it's like, wait a minute, what? So you find out Stilgar is like kind of this like just kooky guy who believes in these like myths and stuff, which is cool. And this starts the what I call Stilgar saves Dune arc, because I think Stilgar is by far the best character in this movie. But you learn about that, you learn some other things about the prophecy, and it's just like it's a really important scene. You also see Stilgar sort of making the prophecy come true for the first time, right? Which has been happening sort of behind the scenes. It's like, and it's in everybody's face that the prophecy is not real. Like it's a Bene Gesserit thing that was invented, and Stilgar believes it, so he is doing things to make it happen, you know? So everything is manufactured, right? Like he says, oh, the chosen one, the voice from the outer world, needs to have a mother who's a Reverend Mother, so we should make that girl the Reverend Mother, so that way the prophecy's right, you know? Right. And it's just really cool, like looking back on it, it's so in your face obvious that this is a false prophecy. Yeah. And it makes it more like painful to watch it the more you realize all the things that like make him not really the chosen one. For sure. And Paul's eating, and he's obviously mad at his mom, and he says, I must sway the non-believers. If they follow me, we can disrupt spice production. The only way to get to the emperor. She says, your father didn't believe in revenge. He says, well, I do. And I was like, so this is, the movie starts with Paul, because last movie ended with Paul in the same, he's in the same spot, right? Yeah. Feels the same way. I guess he plans at this moment in time to use the prophecy. Like right here, he's going to use it, which is, I don't remember thinking this. No, not at all. I must have missed this, or I must not have realized how important it is, even on 2 watches, for him to
look at this, be mad at his mother for doing it, know that it's utterly false, and say, I have to do this because I'm going to avenge my father. And Jessica, of all people, says, your father didn't believe in revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy to me. Absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah, I agree. I remember like watching it through this last time and I was like, wait a minute, he's always been the villain.
Right.
You know? So I think truly from like the fight with Jamis was like the turning point where he was like, okay, I'm going to use my father's ideals to enact my plan.
Yeah.
And it's all like self-motivated, you know? And I do think he like falls in love with Chani. I think that is real. But I
100%.
think from day one, he's like, I'm going to use these people for my gain.
Yes.
Which is wild.
And I think, I think you're right. And I think Chani just like sways his opinion on it. Like she basically makes him, and I think the people, like he grows to know them as people and know their ways and things like that and respect them and feels like he should honor them and changes his mind. But
which I think almost makes it worse too.
It almost
he does live among these people. I do think he respects and cares for these people, but above that, he's enacting his plan, you know? Which is like, that's the way, like, it's not that he's just evil. It's that like he is part of the community and he's also evil, you know? Like that's the worst. And it's so like complicated.
It is very complicated.
So
it's incredibly complex. The story is.
Yeah. I would also say like, I put this down a lot throughout the watching. I think how they did the community of the Fremen is also just so multifaceted to me. And we meet it this first time when Jessica's like becoming the Reverend Mother, when she's doing the thing. We see this like young North versus old South idealism sort of fight happening.
Which is very cool.
And you have characters like Stilgar and Chani who are very well defined and like, you know, all about them. But you also get people like Chani's friend who like, I literally don't remember her name, but I like within like one or two scenes, I know what she's about.
Right.
And you like get to know these little people who just made the like familial aspect of it so not even like fleshed out, because it's not really fleshed out, but I feel like this is a place somebody could be. Like this is an actual living world, you know?
It feels real. I also wonder though if, because throughout the movie, even before Paul kind of like decides, before he like takes off his ring, because that's like the whole thing. When the ring's on, that's what he's wanting to do. When the ring's off, he believes in the Fremen, you know? And I think throughout this whole thing, he continues to say until the end, I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the Lisan al-Gaib. Even when he's made this decision that I must do this to avenge my father, essentially. So I feel like until the moment at the end where he really switches and learns he's a Harkonnen, I don't know if he necessarily had it in him to fully go through with that plan and just trick an entire group of people. And I think it's when he like changes at the end that he has essentially like the ability. Do you disagree?
No, I think you're right. I think it's like, because I think he firmly believes that he's not the chosen one. Right. But he's willing to use that for leverage. He knows
he's not the chosen
one. But
one.
when he finds out his like familial heritage, I think the scope of what he thinks he can actually accomplish grows.
Right.
Because he's been scared of this like holy war the whole time. But once he figures out like all of this additional things, he's like, not only are we going to have the war, but we're going to win it. You know?
Right. I don't know how much at this point, I think he's only seen the Holy War like once. So to him, I don't think he realizes at this point how bad it would be if he did use the Fremen into, like, it's not clear to him.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why his decision at the end is like all the more terrible, because it is clear to him at the end. You know?
Yeah.
So Stilgar basically tells Jessica, you have two choices, and you can either die or become the Reverend Mother. And he does this all while he's at this like sacred place where all these people have given their water after they've died, and like she's crying, and he tells her, never waste your water. He actually says, never give your water away, not even for death, or not even for the dead, which is so good. I think this movie is so quotable.
Yeah,
there's so many like amazing philosophical.
It sounds so biblical.
So biblical. It's so, everything goes back to the theme, it feels like, and I think that's really cool. And Jessica doesn't really want to be doing this, I guess, which is interesting because she has such a shift as well. Like she gradually becomes so different, because she was end of the book or end of the movie, Jessica would say like, yes, I need to become the Reverend Mother, you know, who she is at that point, even though she already is. But I see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But this Jessica is like, well, I don't really have a choice, so I'm going to do it, you know? And I just think it's cool to see her arc as well.
Yeah.
And so they kind of do this like ceremony type thing where she has to drink this like venom, this poison that's the water of life from the worm, and it's like this creepy music of like breathing, and Paul's outside watching while like Chani and her friends are kind of like laughing about it. And this is where like Chani really stands up and says like, basically, we believe in the Fremen, and you want to control people, you tell them about the Messiah. And she starts, it's just like she's the voice of the people, and like she's always right in everything she says, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of just interesting. It's just cool that she gets to be the voice of that.
I think it's cool. I also think it becomes more clear throughout the movie. Chani becomes like the human representation of Arrakis, I feel like. You know, she's very strong. She's independent. She loves where she's at. She doesn't want it to change. And any like she wants change to happen, but it needs to be like from the planet. It needs to be from the people. Which you're totally right. She is always right. She's never wrong in anything she says. And I just think it's really cool because it parallels this big idea of like abusing the planet and all its people into a singular person in Chani, which is just really cool. Very symbolic.
Right, absolutely. And Jessica drinks this water of life and it poisons her, right? But she's able to, Bene Gesserit are like trained to combat poison, which is really freaking cool. And the sound design here is crazy. It's like something crumpling. Like it feels like her insides are crumpling.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
very, very good. And Stilgar basically thinks it's a miracle she survived. And Paul like corrects him and is like, she's trained to do this.
Yeah. I do think this is one of the scenes looking back on it. Cause like, you know, he's like already mad at his mom. So I'm sure he'd love to take a shot. Like, oh, this is what she does.
Right.
There's like a shot where he like looks at them fighting. Cause this is the part where like Chani's like, it's not a miracle. This is crazy or whatever.
She says her people wrote that.
Yeah,
the prophecy.
Exactly. Which again, completely right. And then Paul hears that and then decides to use it, right? Because he uses that as a vehicle to get closer. He's like, I'm not the Messiah. I just want to like live among you. And then they're like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That's
how I took it this time. Like everything is a calculated move for him, I think.
Okay, interesting.
You know?
I don't know. I could totally see that too, though.
Because he doesn't, like at the end of the first movie, he says we need to harness desert power. So he's not trying to live among them. He's trying to like use what they have and
learn their power. Because Chani, I think it's Chani's friend, says the Muad'Dib must be Fremen.
Yeah. And
one of them says Arrakis must be freed by its own people. Which is just so good and like utterly true. That
for sure.
Someone leading them, it's just
going back to what Chani said, like her people wrote the prophecy. Like it's again just like in your face. Like this is not real, you know?
But because we talked about it, because the Bene Gesserits do believe their prophecy is real, right?
I think it's not so much a prophecy. I think it's
a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a plan because they said like it's 90 generations of breeding and the Atreides were close, but they weren't like malleable enough. So I think it's much more like you said. I think it's a calculated effort they're doing than a prophecy that's supposed to happen.
Okay, interesting. So Paul wants to fight beside the Fremen, and then it cuts to Stilgar talking to his like people, saying even more reason to know it's him. He's humble, and this is where it starts like the as it is written.
Yeah, it's so good. And this is like, this introduces Stilgar as the comedic relief or like heart of the movie, I would say.
Right.
Which I really do. Since the first watch, I felt it deep in my heart that like Stilgar made this movie an absolute masterpiece to me.
It just encapsulates the theme, right? Of what this, in such like a heartbreaking way. I agree. He's the heart of the film. And he's also the comedic relief, which I think was so clever because and like we'll talk about this more when we get to the end, but it's every time he like talks about the Lisan Al Gaib for the most part, or when he says as it's written, it's almost always played like for laughs until the end.
Yeah.
And so it's like so emotional. And we can talk about it more when we get there, but this is like the start of it being funny and feeling funny to the audience, and how Stilgar almost feels like kind of kooky right now, and he's believing in something that couldn't be real, but like it's slowly, he has such an arc too where it like slowly evolves into being more serious.
And I think it sort of mirrors, if Chani is like the strength and independence of Arrakis, I think Stilgar is the embodiment of like blind hope in Arrakis.
Faith. Yeah.
You know? Which is just cool because like you see Paul actively manipulating the both of them, which plays out on the larger scale. It's very well done.
Yeah, you're so right. And this was cool. Jessica tells Paul there's only one step left to becoming the Kwisatz Haderach, which is drink the water of life, which I didn't realize. This was like it's just one line, but I thought it was cool that so early on Paul knew what he needed to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, like eventually he does it, but it feels like it's like knowing it so early is just cool to me.
Yeah, I forget how it's like said, but like there's a last step to becoming the Kwisatz Haderach, which is like you need to like put on the worm skin or something.
Oh, okay.
That's in like the third or fourth or fifth book or something like that. Which is crazy. But yeah, it's cool to see Jessica like basically just begging him at this point to do it, which is wild.
So Stilgar starts teaching him the ways of the desert, sort of like he kind of sets him up to learn it because he has to in order to fight with them. And this was like more funny moments. Like I feel like this actor is so, his like comedic timing is so funny. Like when he was like when he's like the little ones or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Little ones you need to look out for, and they're like 3 feet long.
Yeah, he's like, you need to be worried about the centipedes, and then he like opens his hands, he's like the little ones at least, and it's like, oh, those are the little ones. Like it's so funny. Chani's talking with their friend, and they're saying that, well, why do you think Stilgar is teaching him? Because he's continuing to fulfill the prophecy himself, because the Muad'Dib will, or the that's right. The
Lisan Al Gaib.
But they call him something else too.
Muad'Dib is the name he like gave
right,
himself.
but then there's one more they use. I just don't know.
I do think what you're saying is right though. Like the word you're saying is right.
It's close to Muad'Dib, but it's not that.
I think it's
like
Maudi. Maudi, I think you're right.
I think it is. So Chani and her friend are sitting on the sand dunes watching, and it's funny because Stilgar is teaching him, but in doing so, he's helping to continue on the prophecy and make it come true.
Yeah.
And it's just cool because that's like the whole thing about the Bene Gesserits, but to see that people do that as well because they want to believe in something so bad, and they want like a savior so bad, you know? Very cool. Chani at this point decides to help Paul because she feels like he's sincere and not like the other strangers. And a lot of this movie does have subtitles, and I think the acting with this like made up language is so well done.
Yeah.
Because I fully feel like I could turn the subtitles off and kind of understand where they're going. Like at one point I laughed at Stilgar's inflection with this made up words.
For sure.
Because it's so clear that it feels so realistic, and like just the acting is so amazing.
Yeah, I would say like not only is like the intention there, I think everybody sounded really, really natural speaking this language, which I don't know how intense like
their training was.
Yeah, but it was. I remember liking the scenes where they were speaking a different language a lot more.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this is serious.
Right. So Paul sees Chani on the dune and he says Jamis, which is really cool because she's about to teach him the ways of the desert. Which
After
is like,
Stilgar is like, watch out for the dune spirits. You know?
Yeah, seriously. And so she teaches him how to sandwalk. It's very cute. He like tries to correct her, and she's like, and
there's a very little meet cute scene,
right?
Which again goes to your point. Like she's like, you sandwalk bad, and you're not even in worm territory. Like he doesn't know what he's doing at all. Like he does not know their ways as if born to them.
No,
you know?
He doesn't. And Chani doesn't realize it, but like she does. She is helping the prophecy become true. I mean, she does realize it, but she doesn't see what I mean. I think she so believes like he's not. That she thinks she's just helping someone who needs her help.
Yeah.
And that's her motivations. And I think she does like him. So, and there's even this one part where she's like teaching him, But the sound goes out and he's just like staring. Like he loves her. Like he's staring.
Mhm.
And we can barely even hear what she's saying. It's just like this beautiful music. I think their sort of like romance was done really well in this movie.
I agree.
Of them growing and coming together, and it feels so genuine.
Yeah, and it feels so specific to this because like they're falling in love through the doing of actions and things, because this is a society that like, I don't know, I'm sure it's important to some aspect, but I feel like finding the match and falling in love is not at the forefront
Right.
of this culture, especially when you're like actively being invaded, you know?
Yes.
And we follow like the Fedaykin, specifically like the fighting unit
Yes.
of the Fremen. So like, yeah, if you're like hanging out with a bunch of the same people, you're probably like, should we hook up? Should we have, you know? And I think it's super, super natural. They're always doing something. They're not just
Right.
like on a date or anything, which makes it feel more valid.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see Jessica talking to her baby.
Yes. Who, by the
saying-
way, we didn't say that. She was like pregnant when she drank the poison,
Yeah.
which I assume has never happened. I assume that's like a terrible thing because the previous Reverend Mother's absolutely freaking out when she finds out.
Mhm.
I thought it was great. The visuals were cool.
Very
like
cool.
the blue water surrounding like the fetus, and then the eye opens and you're like,
Yes.
oh, that's not good.
And I think the actress who plays Jessica was doing an interview saying that this wasn't in the book, that she could talk to the baby,
Mhm.
and that it was kind of like the director's idea as a way to give her, because the book is so internal. I think it was just a really clever way to give her someone to talk to.
That makes sense.
Very, very smart. And she basically says we need to convert everyone one by one, the non-believers, and we need to use the vulnerable ones. Specifically, we'll start with the ones who fear us. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, terrifying.
Yeah, and she looks so determined.
Mhm.
It's very scary.
We see a desert mouse as the Harkonnens arrive to like continue mining the spice.
Mhm.
And the Fremen are like have their like snorkels under the sand, and then they attack. And this scene was very cool.
Yeah.
There's like the machine gun from like the aerial machine gun. And
Mhm.
at this, Chani even says again about fighting. So it's like she values it so much. And Paul's fighting with them, and specifically with Chani. So like they're obviously very close to each other because they're whatever fighting ranks they're in it together. And Paul's fighting two of the Fremen at once, but one gets away and runs to Chani, and she literally blasts him and just doesn't even, he like is full, like catapulted across, and she looks at Paul and she says, reload. And she's like so focused and she's so determined, and like, it's fun. We don't actually see very much of Chani getting to fight. So like some glimpses of it are really like, we see her at the end getting to fight. We see Paul fight like a lot more,
Yeah.
but it's cool when we do get to see her.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul basically says he's going to trigger the snipers so she can shoot them. And the technology that the Fremen come up with is like so interesting. Like because the sun on Arrakis is so harsh, they have this like visor on her like cannon type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just really cool to see all the ways that the Fremen are so much more advanced and equipped to live in this world, because they have to be. You know, they talk all the time about how the Fremen don't have resources. So they have to like make their own. They like get the sniper, they get the helicopter, and it like falls in flames to the ground as they like run across it together. Very cool. Very cinematic.
I thought all the choreography for the actual like sequence was really cool. We see the spice harvester, which it had like a new design. Like I assumed it was like a newer model from the Harkonnen that they like took with them. And again, all the vehicles look really good in this movie. They're so fun to look at. They look so epic and huge and important. It's got like the crawly spider legs that they're hiding behind from the copter. It's just like very well staged, I thought, you know? And then this happened like one or two other times during the movie, and I never got tired of it. They would have this thing where all the sound cuts out. And in this instance, Chani was like running to Paul because they just took down the copter. And like all we hear is her like laughing. She's like, haha. And then the copter crashes to the ground like 100 feet in front of them. And then the music comes back in, and it's just like, it's so epic. Everything that happens is like, wow, maybe he is the chosen one. You know?
Right, exactly. So they're in the tent celebrating the win, and I would say this is one of my like top favorite scenes.
I agree.
I was like, tears were streaming down my face when I was watching this, and I know I'm being dramatic, but I just think it's like such a good story, and it's so well done. It's so, this idea of like taking a group of people and and just using them and like using a religious prophecy to do it. It just like it for some reason it's like just very emotional to me. I was like sobbing.
Mhm.
So they're celebrating and Chani asks how he learns to fight. And he just like segues, he uses it. He says, my old masters, they were massacred. And he says, I know everything about the Harkonnens. You know the desert. We can like essentially take them on together.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool because Paul will do this thing where he asks other people. I feel like maybe this is his Bene Gesserit training.
Yeah.
Probably. So Stilgar's like, well, what would you do? And Paul immediately says, what will you do, Stilgar? And he says, I would go further north. And Paul says, then that's what I'll do.
Mhm.
And it's just like, because that's sort of the MO of the Bene Gesserits is like, they don't make the decisions, you know, they just lead from the shadows. So it's very cool to me that we see Paul doing that. And it comes off really respectful.
For sure.
But I also do think it could be calculated.
That's how I took it. And he chooses at some point, like in the middle of his little speech, to start speaking in Fremen.
Right.
Which again, I'm like, that's a power move.
Because she says, Chani's friend says
The
you'll
further
die.
north you go, you'll die. Like,
And
the
he
better
says,
chance you die.
so I'll die. And he says, then maybe you will too, but others will keep going. And it's like so
like he's talking like a prophet.
speech,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like he's giving a speech, and it works.
Mhm.
They say he deserves to be Fedaykin, and they give him a fighting name. Paul says, what do you call the desert mouse? And they literally laugh. And Stilgar says, no, like the desert mouse knows the ways of the desert, and it makes its own water. And it's like so inspiring because again, like that is such a metaphor for who Paul is, like surviving. And it's just really, really
and
good.
to Stilgar to like defend it. It's like, you know, Stilgar's MO. Like
He
could say
believes.
anything and he's going to find some way to be like, actually, that's the smartest choice you could have made. That's the
Right.
chosen one's name.
And I think what's like important to note is it's not that these people are like dumb or being taken advantage of. It's like, it's faith being used against them, right? It's like so instilled in who they are.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Like I don't
mean,
think it's that
we just-
Stilgar is naive.
We just need to go back to what Chani said out loud to the audience.
Right.
Like if you give people a prophet, they'll wait for centuries,
Right.
you know?
And you can like forget yourself sometimes, like and see how you would, if you were sitting there, how you could believe Paul.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
know?
think it's proven when the movie came out and there were debates online. People were like, no,
Right.
he's the chosen one. And it's like, actually, no.
He's
Like,
really
it's
not.
absolutely not. But, and like, so many people were like, he has to be this, and this. And then you find out those can be easily explained. Those were
Right.
exploited by him. So, you know, I remember both of us leaving the movie and being like, wait a minute, is he the chosen one though?
Right.
So I think for anybody who's thinking that the Fremen are like naive, it's like, you also got tricked. And it only took
Right.
2.5 hours for you to get tricked.
Yeah, they
You know?
had months, you know,
They
and
had
centuries. Right. And so Leto wanted desert power because he wanted to use the Fremen to take on the Harkonnens, correct?
Yes.
Like that's why he kept saying desert power in the first movie.
I think he just wanted to solidify the safety of his house.
Yes, and ally with the Fremen, and
Yeah.
together they were going to basically destroy House Harkonnen. So
Pretty much.
that's very interesting. So then Stilgar is on a worm, and it's like he's like yelling to him, right?
Yeah.
It's very funny. And this Paul goes, "Father, I found my way." He takes his ring off because this
Mhm.
is where he decides, like, these are my people. Chani is who I'm going to be with. Like, I will fight with them and try to take on the Harkonnens that way.
Mhm.
And then Chani joins him. And it's just like the ring is such a good symbol of House Atreides and like Paul's motives at
Yeah.
the moment in time and who he is going to be, because he's all these paths and all these identities, and the like desert mouse represents something, but then the ring represents something else. It's like all so
For sure.
so well done, such good symbolism.
And he puts the ring away as the symbol of Arrakis arrives in
Mhm.
Chani. And he's like
Right.
choosing that, you know?
Right, exactly. And so they have this like cute connection where they're talking about rain, and Chani says, your blood is the blood of dukes, but we're all equal on Arrakis. This is where we learn Chani's like secret name means desert spring, which is important. That like comes back later. And she even says it's from a prophecy, and she hates it.
Mhm.
And he does the thing again where he's like, what do you want to be called? Then I'll call you that.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like he's very genuine here. I like believe who he is.
Mhm.
And she says, without even meaning to, he's like persuaded her. She says, maybe you could be Fremen. Maybe I'll show you the way. And it's like clear that they are like together now.
Yeah. Which I think Jamis says in a vision in the first movie.
Oh,
he says, I will show you the way.
He does. Yeah, that's really cool.
And I'm pretty sure in the first movie there's like a vision, like we've seen Jamis, but it shifts to Chani.
There is. I'm so sure there is.
So like, yeah, Chani's supposed to be the teacher, which is very cool.
Yes. Well, because they always talk about how like the desert will show you the way. The desert will decide your fate. And so I think it's cool that like Chani does absolutely represent Arrakis and the desert. And so she does show him the way.
Yeah.
And so then they have like a montage of fighting the Harkonnens and trying to disrupt Spice. And then we see Vladimir, who's like the Baron, who's like very mad that it's being disrupted. And basically, if they don't keep it on, the Emperor's going to take Arrakis away.
Yeah. We cut to him and we don't even see him yet. We see the room he's in and then just two girls like screaming.
Right.
And I thought that was a really strong way to like reintroduce this character.
That's another Harkonnen just like killing people on screen.
Exactly, yeah.
What does Usul mean? He's got his like names. What is Usul his name mean?
Usul is Stilgar was like, I see strength in you. Usul is, I don't think it means strength. I think it's like, he said something, it's like the base of a pillar.
Okay. So that's the name like Stilgar gave him, right?
Yeah. That's his like secret name.
Oh, that's really cool. So Paul's having a nightmare. It's him following someone in the desert, which we later find out is Jessica. Yeah. Right. And he says, like, when he follows this person, it's going to create a holy war, millions of people starving. This had me wondering, like, was he always going to make a choice for war? You know, like, was it inevitable that he chose this? Was there ever really a path that he wouldn't, you know?
I think it's like, because he's hesitant to go south. So I think in his mind, like, she doesn't want this to happen until he like drinks the poison and realizes what like needs to be done. So I think, yeah, when he puts the ring away, he's like, how can I have the best of both worlds, basically? Right. You know?
Right. How can I take on the Harkonnens but not lead these people to a holy war? Yeah. So this is the day that he's going to ride a worm for the first time, and like Shai-Hulud will decide if he actually becomes Fremen or if he's going to die. And
we see Chani wearing the blue headband.
Yeah.
That's like a marriage thing, right?
I think so. It means like she's like in a relationship, I'm pretty sure. I think it actually means... Because I think in the book, does she have a baby? I don't know if that's true.
I think she does, yeah.
So I think in the book, it's supposed to mean, because I was on Reddit, obviously, people were saying that when they saw it, they were like, oh, like they're going to do it in this movie. Like it's going to be, well, not like that. Like they're going to like, gotcha. It's going to happen. Like they're going to have a baby in this movie. And it's like, no, that's not true. So he calls a worm. It's very cool. It's very suspenseful. I remember like the first time I watched this being very like worried for him.
It's crazy how they balance scenes of like talking, which is always like more than talking. It's always like either really good characters or exposition or something. Like those aren't boring by any means. Yeah, but then these super spectacle filled, huge set epic scenes as well, like the opening scene, the taking down of the spice harvester, and then this worm riding scene. Like it's so crazy how they marriage each thing so well together.
Yeah, he calls like a huge worm.
As is written.
Right, as is written. And at this moment, so he's like running on top of the dune and jumps on the worm. And at this moment, I like decided in my head that there's no way in the world at all that I could be Fremen. Right, like in that moment in time, I was like, I could not do what Paul's doing. There's no way. The way I would turn and run the exact opposite way from that worm. So he jumps on the worm and latches onto it, which worms must travel really fast. Like they always get there so fast, right? When they call a thumper. I guess that's because they're in worm territory. But yeah, see what I mean? They just must travel very fast, right?
Yeah.
So he's on the worm. He like gets it. He's like fully riding the worm. And then the music plays, which I think this is like the Lisan Al Gaib theme.
I think it's called the Lamentation. It's like lamentation music, which is like prayerful, like sorrowful prayer kind of
like
thing.
Lamenting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like that's what the piece is called. And I agree. Anytime
because it actually doesn't play that much.
No, it doesn't play that much. I think it plays every time Paul assumes the role of the prophet.
Okay.
Whether or not he believes it or not. Like it happens when he stands on the worm. It happens when he like sees through the fights he's in. You know, I think it's him choosing to use that power. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Because this is absolutely insane. First of all, this music it's epic and powerful, but it's also like so ominous. I think it's so well done. So well done. And everyone starts cheering for him. And Stilgar, of course, says as it's written. And then they all start bowing and chanting and praying, except Chani.
And Chani's like actively not, like she's uncomfortable by it. And
then it cuts from a Paul riding the worm to a picture of the prophecy. Of the prophet, of the Messiah riding a worm.
That's crazy. Before we move on, I do want to say like the sound design of him like falling from the dune onto the worm was just like, I don't know. I couldn't describe the feeling in the theater. Like it was so grand, but so intense, and you were there, and like all my senses were active. It was crazy how good and how powerful it felt.
Right. And I feel like him riding the worm was a big shift for the people. You know, I think they like wanted to believe it, and this felt like proof to them.
Yeah.
Because then someone runs in and tells Jessica what happened. And this is crazy. She's like talking about what happens, and it focuses on Jessica, who is like hearing the news.
Yeah.
And basically she manipulates these people and tells them, yes, great, go spread the word now.
Yeah. I think we also looked this up. The writing on her face is her thing that she says, like, fear is the mind killer, all that, which is very cool.
And she's sort of just like planning what to do. And at this point, I literally questioned, like, does she believe it herself? No, because it's not real to her, right? Like, she doesn't believe.
I think she believes in the
Lisan al-Gaib?
No, I think she believes in the Kwisatz
Haderach. Yeah. Yes, 100%. Well, because she says the Kwisatz Haderach will be born in the south. But I don't think that's part of the it's like part of the plan, like you said, like the prophecy / plan that they've come up with.
Yeah.
Chani and Paul are together, and this is so sad to me. She basically says, will you always be with me? And he says, as long as I breathe. And she's basically saying, like, people are worshiping you. There's going to be trouble. And Jessica is fanning the flame, saying you are the one. And this is just so sad, because I do think at this point, Paul does believe that this is what he's chosen and this is what he will do. And he will live with Chani and love Chani and stay with her. And it's like really sad to know, obviously, the ending. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Without even telling her. So then Paul and Jessica are talking, and she feels like the baby feels like he's blinded by love, and that he has to reserve his hand for an alliance. And Paul says he can't go south. And I thought this was really cool. He says, it's not a prophecy. It's a story you keep telling, but it's not your story to tell. They should be led by the Fremen. And she says, we gave them something to hope for. And he says, that's not hope. It's super strong. So strong. Oh my gosh. Because you see how these people both believe in everything they're saying so much. And I mean, it is hope for some of these people, but it's like, it's not real hope, because it's so false. It's like manipulated. And how this like oppressed group their oppression is being used against them for someone else's benefit, who at the start of the last movie was their oppressor. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's so genius and terrifying. So basically it ends with Jessica saying, we'll be waiting for you, because she knows. And he sees the woman again, and we realize it's Jessica this time. And I thought this was really cool, because every time we see Jessica, she has more and more done. So like it starts, she's just sort of in like a shawl. And then after that, she's got like the writing on her face. And then she's got like the Bene Gesserit robes. And by the end, she's got the full Reverend Mother head to toe. She doesn't just one day switch. She like slowly. And I think even like the way her outfits are shows, I think it shows like her power and her abilities, like her sway over the people getting stronger. But I also think it really shows the prophecy, the belief in the prophecy growing. The way they've used her costumes to reflect the beliefs of the people is genius. And she basically gains more power as the people believe more and more, you know?
I agree.
Very well done. Very well done.
The costuming throughout, because we see a lot of costumes in like the first chunk of the first movie, but then it's sort of like all similar. You see like Sardaukar fighting uniforms, you see like the still suits and stuff. I feel like specifically with Jessica and Florence Pugh, they went off with these costumes.
Yeah.
Like every scene, Florence Pugh is in something else that is like so gaudy, but she's pulling it on, and it's just like really fun to watch. And everything looks so uncomfortable to wear.
Right. I feel like part of the elaborate costumes, and I think they shot on location, you know, like they're not with a green
They
screen.
were on Arrakis.
They were in, I don't actually remember where they're at, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They are like in a place with like sand and stuff. And I feel like part of that is why these performances are so strong and genuine and believable, because they felt so like consumed by their environment,
Gotcha.
you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just think it adds something when you have like a real life thing that you're acting with. I think it adds to like your abilities as an actor. And so I really think that like helped for sure. Basically, the next scene is just the Harkonnens like continue, Dave Bautista's character like continuing to try to get to the Fremen, and one of the Fremen like attacks him and says like for Muad'Dib, which is part of I guess how they start to realize who like Muad'Dib is, and that this like person is leading them.
Is it the Fremen? The Fremen blew up like a spice reserve, right? So they flew over there. So there's like dust and spice everywhere. And we see a Fremen soldier literally like somersault into view, cut somebody out, and then somersault back into like the mist, basically. And that was super badass.
Yeah.
And just seeing like throughout the movie, seeing the Fremen, like you said, use these like creative fighting tactics, using the land, it never once gets old.
No.
It is always really so fun. Cool. They fight so ferociously. Like they're always jumping on people, twisting them around, cutting them down, which is crazy. It's so good. And you like, it's so obvious why they're such a threat, you know? Because even at the end, they're like cutting down Sardaukar, which we've known from the last movie. Sardaukar are like the most feared warriors in the galaxy. And Chani's taken down like 10 within 30 seconds. And I fully believe it. You know, they're on their land, they're on their turf, they know what they're doing. They're just as ruthless. And it also speaks to like Paul's training, right? Like Gurney and Duncan, Idaho, like it's again just all works in this world of solidifying things, you know. Like we didn't know Duncan that well, but like I know who he is, like I know how good he was, you know. Even though I like saw him fight once, maybe, you know.
The Emperor, and I don't know Florence Pugh's character's name, but I'm just going to continue to call her the daughter or Florence Pugh, because I did write Florence in all my notes.
Yeah, I'm sure that's fine.
So basically the Emperor asks her, like, what would you do? How would you handle this? And she says that her idea is let the war continue, step in, stop it as a savior. Because if you continue to oppress them, it's only going to make their religion flourish. And she basically tells him, you're underestimating the power of faith. And I thought a lot of the Emperor scenes, and like specifically Florence Pugh's scenes, really like drive the theme home, you know, of how important like faith is to these people. And she even says like prophets get stronger when they die, meaning like you can't just go kill this Muad'Dib. Yeah. And they start to take on like other names, like the Muad'Dib starts to be not only the least, but he's also the prophet who points the way, which is very cool. Obviously, like To Paradise is the meaning. Florence Pugh's character kind of puts it together that Paul Atreides could still be alive, and it could be him. He could be Muad'Dib. But the Reverend Mother is like, not even your father should understand that information, because if he is alive, he probably knows that we allied with the Harkonnens, that the Emperor allied with the Harkonnens, and the Great Houses would absolutely not back the Emperor, and he would face war and lose. Which, at the end, we realized she knew the Emperor's downfall the whole time, which was kind of crazy to me, this Reverend Mother. Yeah. Florence Pugh's character even goes, then what hope is there? And she says, we don't hope, we plan. And this is where we get to like Fate Rotha. So if you want to say something before that.
Yeah, I think it's just neat from like hearing the Emperor's daughter, Irulan is her name. Irulan. Hearing her talk.
I don't even know if they say her name.
I don't think they do, which is kind of a power move.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just like, I remember the first time I was like, wow, she's so smart. She's giving off Bene Gesserit. And then we find out she was like taught by the Reverend Mother how to do everything. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're super smart. And then they start talking, and she's like, "What if Paul's alive?" And she's like, "Shut your mouth."
Mhm.
Then I kept thinking, like, how much of this is like still planned? Because she says that
Right.
like, we don't hope, we make plans. We have various prospects. Because in the first movie, she does this thing where Paul's hand is in the box, and then she says, "I hope you live." And to me, I
Yeah.
think she's fully talking about the destruction of the entire house, like not just going to Arrakis. I think she means
Yeah,
in
in
the
the first movie. I
destruction.
agree. I
So
agree.
like, is this still like her plan? Like, what is the end goal for Paul in the Reverend Mother's eyes? Because at the end, I feel like she is not liking what's happening.
No.
You know. So at what point did it turn actually bad? Like, was everything right until he beat Fade Rotha? Like, was that the move?
I feel like they plan, but I don't think it's like a plan that is this is the only way.
Yeah. And I mean, she says that too. We don't choose sides.
Right, exactly. And they say like Paul's not our only subject that we're working with essentially because they have Faith Rotha on there too. So I think it's plans with like I think they have like A B C D E F G. And
Mhm.
whatever it is how it is and that's what we're going to continue with and go with. Like even if plan F happens, that's fine because we still planned for that and we're still going to continue on.
Mhm.
I feel like they did not plan for Paul and Jessica to essentially like call the great houses and for everyone to like actually stand behind Paul as this liaison Al Gaib to the extent where they would go into this war.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she wanted the war, but I just think maybe what it is like, why is she okay with the emperor being overthrown? You know?
Yeah.
Because they feel like they can control like Paul or Fade Rotha, whoever happens to become the next emperor is fine because whatever they can
Mhm.
control him. So maybe they realized at the end, like Paul is not controllable anymore.
Gotcha.
And Jessica is not.
Jessica, yeah,
She's
like
on her
acting
own
out.
path now.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe
That is interesting. I do
that's
wanna
kind of what
say,
it is.
looking up her name, I was reading up like the wiki of like Dune.
Mm-hmm.
And her family is House Corino or Corino. I'm not really sure.
This is the emperor's daughter.
Yeah, this is the emperor and the emperor's daughter. They've been the ruling family the entire time. Their family has been the imperial family for 10,000 years. So I feel like it's a really, really huge deal that the Reverend Mother's like, we should get somebody else on the throne.
Wow.
You know?
I guess the reason behind that would be she wants the most controllable person on the throne.
I guess so. That's just crazy to me that like you would take the family line out, you know?
Yeah. Well, no, they wouldn't because Florence Pugh's character.
Yeah.
So I think they're okay with it because still like
so. That's just crazy to me. Like I looked it up and I was like,
yeah,
wow.
it is. I don't know if in this world it passes down only through men though. Like I don't think so.
I guess it depends. I think it depends on like which house is stronger, probably, right? Because if you're a guy but you're from like a less noble house, you probably want the stronger house name anyway.
Interesting. But the scene right before the scene sort of transitions is the Reverend Mother tells Florence Pugh's character that we have Fade Rotha. And she says he's psychotic. The Reverend Mother goes, that's irrelevant. The question is if we can control him. Which it's like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah. Well, and they're talking about her marrying one of them.
Yeah.
Right. So for her to be like, but he's fucking crazy. And she's like, and?
Right.
I think that's really cool. Like,
who cares?
It's just like, even the Bene Gesserit are like ruthless and mean. And, you know, like nobody is innocent in this story, which is very cool.
Fade Rotha, it's like his birthday and he's going to be fighting in an arena to celebrate his birthday. And they've drugged, it's like the last members of the Atreides house. Yeah,
which is cool.
The Baron basically has one of them not drugged because he's testing Fade Rotha. He wants to see what he's going to do. And this is kind of funny to me because it's all like, yes, these Harkonnens are like brutal and fighting, good fighters and stuff like that. But this is not even close to like a real fight at all. You know, like they're drugged. He's got his shield on. There's like people monitoring it to grab the person. See what I'm saying? Like it feels so like weak to me almost. Even that I could win with those odds. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think they like bring attention to it. Lady Fenring says like, oh, these are all just for show, whatever. Yeah, I think it's cool. The location is crazy. We go to like the black and white world.
Yeah, it was shot infrared.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, just to make it black and white, like in camera?
Yeah, but it's also to give it that like distinct effect.
Gotcha.
Like in the book, it's called Planet of the Black Sun, but it's like potentially metaphorical is what it says.
Gotcha.
And it's supposed to give it this, because it's not just like black and white, you know, just black and white wouldn't feel the same as this like infrared.
I guess that's true.
You know?
Yeah. It looks so good. It's so cool. I also think it like weirdly paints them as like, I put this down as like black and white bad guys, you know, like just because of how ruthless they are. And we just said like everybody's sort of to blame for this, but like if I were gonna pick one decided family to be like the worst, it'd be the Harkonnens, you know?
Yeah, because I do feel like, if we're ranking people, I don't feel like Paul ranks as bad as the Harkonnens.
Yeah. But that does like come back later when he finds out that he himself is a Harkonnen.
Yes.
Right? So he's like, why don't we just be the most evil we
can?
Right.
Right. So of course, Feyd-Rautha, we see that, which Austin Butler, I think, does a fantastic job as Feyd-Rautha. And he like takes his shield off. He's going to fight this guy that's not drugged. And he wins and is like laughing. The knife is like pointing at his face and he's laughing. Because of this, Vladimir decides to give him Arrakis. And he says, tame the spice and I'll make you emperor. We will destroy the great houses. Or we help. No. He says that we will tell the great houses that the emperor helped me destroy Atreides, and they'll turn on him, and then we can be. So maybe that always was Bene Gesserit's plan, you know, because they've been in talk with Vladimir.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is where we have the Bene Gesserit woman, which her name's Margot Fenring, I think. She is following Feyd-Rautha, and this whole like the lighting, the sound, there's the like inkblot fireworks. It's all very cool and very disorienting. And she basically takes him to her room and it's all like slow motion. And she's like, kneel. And then she says, put your right hand in the box. And it like quick moves to the poison at his neck. Yeah. I think it's very well done. It's really.
I thought that was cool. I was thinking like, is she using like a different style of the voice the whole time? Because it starts doing all these like crazy shots like of like super focused. And to me, I was like, maybe that's like what Feyd-Rautha was hearing. You know,
that's what I felt like it was. What Feyd-Rautha was hearing.
Okay, because she was giving like commands, which to me was like, oh, she's using the voice, but it didn't sound like it normally was. So I think that was like just a really cool perspective to show it from. Yeah, if that's what it was.
Well, I think she was just like, I don't know what all the Bene Gesserits are able to do. Yeah, but it sounds very much like they're able to do a lot. Yeah. So I would think she was just using her abilities. But then we cut to them, like the Bene Gesserits discussing, and they feel like they can control him. He is a sociopath. He is high intelligent, but she says he yearns to be hurt. He loves pain, and they feel like they can control him. So they're like, okay, that's a path we can take. If Feyd-Rautha could be the person that we, manipulate into. Yeah. Right. So then we see Gurney, who has been smuggling spice since the attack on Atreides.
All those months ago.
Right. And the Fremen attack, but Paul recognizes Gurney and says, I recognize your footsteps.
That was really cute.
It was very cute. And he has the Fremen stand down. It's a very sweet moment. They're like reunited. And Gurney says the reason why he stayed on Arrakis and the reason why he's been doing this is because he wants blood. And Gurney says something about fear, but Paul says our resources are limited. Fear is all we have. Which again is really good. It's another like very big like biblical epic moment where you see like what this world is.
Yeah, I also feel like Gurney is the last piece of the puzzle. Like,
yes,
this is Paul's embodiment of the Atreides side of him. Yes. Right? Like, this is the final nail in the coffin that like, actually I am selfish and this is for me and this is what we're doing.
Part of that is because he gives him the arsenal, which we learn about that like the next scene. Yeah. But it's also, and Gurney does like try to persuade Paul into this way, but I do agree. I feel like it's this tie back to who he was. Because Gurney says you have the power to avenge your father and you're too afraid to use it. He says because you'll lose control. He says thousands will die because of me because you'll lose control. And he says no, because I gain it. Yeah. He even says they used to be friends and now they're followers.
It's crazy. It's really
and
good.
You just see, because I feel like that is hard, right? If an entire group of people is literally worshiping you.
Yeah.
do feel like it is hard to be the
you're
good
already
guy.
isolated.
Right, exactly. He doesn't really have anyone but Chani. Because even like Stilgar, who's his friend, constantly is talking about the prophecy that we see.
Yeah.
So Gurney shows him, tells him about the arsenal, which this scene is like Paul's looking at his ring while he's talking about the arsenal, which is just really good symbolism that he's thinking like he could go back.
Yeah.
He could change.
This also is just wild to me in this like world of 10,000 years of a future. We have all this technology. They're like, we have nukes. And I'm like, wait a minute, we have those. Like, that's really scary. And those are like the scariest things you have.
Wait,
I just said like weirdly real life for a second, you know, like, because Gurney's like, yeah, like you're the chosen one, but you want real power. We have warheads.
Right.
And I just remember every time I've seen that movie, I'm like, damn, that's just a little too real. It's kind of scary.
We find out that the Bene Gesserits have been at work in the South, which I'm guessing the Reverend Mother means Jessica has been at work in the South. But
no, I think,
okay.
Well, because that's another like Florence Pugh narration, right? I think that's like the South. They've been going there for a while. Like that's probably where the Lisan al-Gaib rumor started, right? Because then she says like reports of this new mother from the north saying these things. So I think she gets intel from them because they're so planted in the south of Arrakis.
Okay, because
which is a cool another thing, because like all the Harkonnen records show that nobody lives in the south.
Yes.
But the Bene Gesserit know that they're like the most people live in the south.
Yes, which is so cool. The Emperor's daughter says that the South is basically like very hard to live in. And she says nothing can live in the South without faith. And I think that is like boils it down to a T who the Arrakis people are, who the Fremen are.
Yeah.
Because it's true. Like when you live in this desolate place where like water is scarce, like it's hard to even live in this world. The only thing that you can have to keep you going is faith. And I feel like had this been on another planet, we wouldn't have the same effect of this prophecy. And I just think it's very interesting.
I agree.
So Paul has this dream where Chani's dying, but he wakes up to the siege being attacked. And we even see like the water being destroyed, which was like very, very sad.
For sure.
And it's basically Fade Rotha who is making this decision. I did think it was kind of funny that like all Fade Rotha did differently was he like directly attacked their like temple quote. But I guess that was kind of what Florence Pugh's whole thing was, is like, don't attack them there because that just makes their faith stronger. And that is what happened. Yeah. Right. Like in the end, Fade Rotha, I guess, was wrong. You know? It's very sad. People are injured and bleeding and dying, and the entire North has been hit. And they've decided that, well, they say that a council in the South where all leaders have to attend. So everyone decides that they're going to go south. But the thing about South is only the leaders can speak in the council. And Stilgar wants Paul to literally kill him and take his place so he can speak and be the Lisan al-Gaib.
They choose this to be another like moment of Stilgar having like character though, because it's not like, oh, you need to take my place. It's like he says now would be a great time to battle me to the death, because he's like really injured. And it's like, that's so like, and then you pull back the layer and he's literally saying you should kill me right now so I can die honorably, but you can do what you need to do. And it's like he's so willing to drop his life for Paul at any
because
moment.
he believes wholeheartedly. Because then he says this. He goes, Paul says, you know, I don't believe in all that. And Stilgar says, I don't care what you believe. Yeah. I believe. And I think if I had to like narrow this story down to what it is, it's that. It doesn't matter what Paul believes or even what Paul does. Yeah. Because at this point, the prophecy means more to the people than the truth. Yeah. Right. Who Paul is, if he's Lisan al-Gaib or not, doesn't even matter at this point in the movie. It doesn't even matter because it is the faith these people have and what they believe in that will push this narrative forward, right? Like it's almost to the point where like the Bene Gesserits, this is what it is, right? It is to the point where the Bene Gesserits don't have control over it anymore. They don't have control of the prophecy. The Fremen people do. It's what they believe now.
Which I think is like the full extent of what they're searching for is. And I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure because we find out the Kwisatz Haderach is actually one of Paul's like children later on down the line. Like this is thousands of years in the future, because once he becomes like the worm, he like lives forever, right? But enough generations pass, and when you're like inducted with all the spice, just like Paul can, you can like see the future, right? You can see all these possible futures, and eventually somebody in the Atreides line is born, where I think Leto is the one. Leto can't
Leto
see.
2.
Yeah,
Like
Leto the second can't see any future with that person. Like they are truly fully unplugged from the fate of the universe, you know? Which I like, if you're thinking about it, it is completely out of the control of the Bene Gesserit at that point. And I think that's why everybody's so scared of it.
I think so too.
You know? All that to say, I think it's really cool. I think you're exactly right. It's so much power. I think this is before he drinks the poison and like knows what to do. I think Stilgar saying, I don't care what you believe, this is what happens, is his final being like, okay, I will commence with my plan.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Because at that point, even the people closest to him, aside from Chani, like they don't see him as a person anymore.
No,
you
not
know?
at all.
Which is cool. Because I feel like Jessica has stopped seeing him as a person for a while as well, too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. For quite a while at this point, which is, I think, what Leto was afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I do feel like Paul, because it seems to me in this moment, Paul is afraid of what he will do if he goes south. Because it feels like it's like temptation.
Yeah.
Like this want and need for revenge feels like all consuming to him. Like he can't stave it off any longer. And he knows I feel like he knows if he goes south, he's not going to change. And so by going south, he does sort of make a decision, even if he doesn't realize he's made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
So he even like is ordering everyone else to go and without him, and he's going to stay. But he decides to like he says, talk to me, Jamis, which is like very, very powerful. Like Jamis is his like teacher, these visions he's having. And Jamis tells him, you can't see the future without knowing your past. Unlock your mind. You must drink the water of life. And he basically says like, a hunter would go at the top of the dune to see everything. You need to see everything before you make this decision. And this is where I'm like, so why is he being told this if he's not the Kwisatz Haderach, you know?
I think it's just spice hallucinations.
You think so? For real?
I think so. Or
is it this Bene Gesserit power in a man? It's kind of overpowering, you know?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe any man who can like survive the power can just like see the future.
Because even like Anya Taylor-Joy, who's like the vision of the baby as an adult, tells him like, you're not prepared for what's going to happen. Like you can't handle it. And I feel like that's part of it is like he can't. It's like too much. I
don't know exactly what it is, but I do think it's just like all these factors. I feel like we know that Paul is like adverse to spice, like he's very sensitive of it. So any like Bene Gesserit training he has with like sensing things or seeing things is heightened and distorted with that, you know, which is why his like visions are always like changing and it's different people saying different things, which I think is really cool. So I don't know the specifics, but again, I think it's justified where it's not it's not like the voice of the chosen one telling him to go south. It's like one voice inside his head is telling him to go south and he's like, okay, I'll do that.
Because I also see if he's seeing, because he sees pathways, right? He sees what could happen. I wonder if he's seeing the one he wants to see.
Maybe.
You know, without even realizing it. Because I do think it's out of his control to a certain point. So he tells Chani, if I go south, I might lose you. And she says, you will never lose me, Paul Atreides. Not as long as you stay who you are. Which is so good because it's not... It's true, right? Like it's true, right? Because he doesn't stay who he is. He doesn't stay this person.
And I think in that moment, the foreshadowing is that she calls him Paul Atreides.
Yes.
You know, it is not his like Fremen secret name that is sacred to them. He is the outsider who is using the people. And that just hit me really hard this time. I thought that was really cool. Because he also, right after, he's like, okay, I will do that. And then I will do what must be done. And you can see Chani's face being like, huh? What's that? And then they just cut to the next scene.
Right.
So you're like, oh shit, Paul's in endgame mode right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Because I don't even know if he wants to do it just yet.
I don't know. I think he has reservations for it for sure. Like I definitely know he wants to avenge his father, but like I think he's still thinking at what cost, right?
Yeah, I also think, yes, I agree. I also think his sort of last, the way Gurney is sort of his last tie to House Atreides, I feel like Chani is his last tie to Arrakis.
Yeah.
And her still believing in him at this moment, you know? Because later when they sort of break apart is when things do fully shift. And like, because he doesn't really have anyone else.
Yeah.
So I think Chani is still pulling him in one direction.
For sure. And regardless of how much he actually knows, he knows going south, everything will be different.
Yes.
Which I think is really cool.
So Chani's friend was left behind, and Feyd-Rautha, like, just, we find out, he kills her. He kills this friend. We see Paul in the south, in where we saw Jessica with like the baby sandworm earlier, where she like told the woman who like controls the sandworm, if a man comes to do this, like she even uses the voice and says like, let him drink. And so this woman here has the water of life, and she gives it to Paul. And I thought this was very cool. She says, if you drink, you shall die. If you drink, you may see. Meaning like, no matter what, you're going to die. You're going to become this new, a shift will happen. Yeah. You will not be who you were before after you drink this, but you may see. Yeah. Which I thought, like, either way, right? You see what I'm saying? You either will literally die or you will become a different person. And he drinks it. And this is where he sees like his adult sister. And this was crazy. Chani lands, she runs to Paul, who's unconscious, basically dead. And she's mad. Chani is mad. She's blaming Jessica, and Jessica like literally uses the voice on her.
Which is wild.
Absolutely. And Chani's like telling her, you do it, you fix it, you did this. You might believe in this prophecy, but you're a part of it. And Chani, being like her name being Desert Spring, she takes her tear and she takes the water of life and like feeds it to Paul basically. And he wakes up and they all bow to him. And even like Stilgar, I think, says he shall come back to life using Desert Spring tears. Yeah. And I guess I think this is all Jessica manipulating things. And it's like happenstance that Chani is that.
Yeah, I think that's another like coincidence thing. You know, because Jessica knows full well everybody's like secret name because she has all the history, right? So I think she knows that that's part of the prophecy. I think the tear into the thing is pointless. I just think Paul can also distill poison like Jessica can.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
He's probably just not as good at it.
Yes. Let's say someone else's name was Desert Spring. Yeah. That other person would be right there because Jessica would make sure she was right there.
I think so.
See what I mean? So yeah, I do think that's a huge part of it. So Chani slaps him and leave. And like I said, this is kind of the like the moment where it's like the oh shit moment. Like we're going, right? Yeah. Everything is absolutely different at this point. So Paul is talking to Jessica and he says the visions are clear now. He sees possible futures all at once. He does this cool thing with his hand and he's like,
it was really cool.
It was really cool. It was so simple, but he's like, our enemies prevail, but I see a narrow way through.
It's like a little turn. He's like, there are so many wrong choices, but there's one right.
It's so simple. And I'm like, but it's so good. And he realizes that he is Vladimir Harkonnen's grandson and Jessica is his daughter. And she said she didn't know until he drank the poison. And basically says, we're Harkonnens, so this is how we'll survive, by being Harkonnens. Yeah. And I guess you could ask, like, why did that change his mind so much? And I think it's because his, like, need for revenge, knowing that it was even, like, being a Harkonnen and they still attacked him and, like, took his people, I feel like that just amplified his need for revenge more. Plus that, along with the water of life, Chani being mad at him, it's almost like if we were talking about how the power was overcoming him before, after drinking this water of life, I think this power is overcoming him to a T, right? Like he was always going to be tempted by this, by being in the South, by seeing these people bow to him. Yeah, it all was too much and he couldn't resist this anymore. See what I'm saying? Yeah. That's kind of where I think it went.
I feel like it's almost like he can see everything too, right? So if you see the clear way to victory, it's like I don't know, like I almost feel like he's not mad at anything. Like he realizes this and he's like, that's how we'll do it. You know, like it's like this is the piece of the puzzle or something, you know? Because I remember he doesn't seem upset and Jessica doesn't seem upset at knowing this, right? They're not like, that's disgusting, it's this and that. Right. She's just like, okay, then we'll be true to our heritage and we'll do what they do, you know? Right. I don't know. I just think it's, again, another like character shift reborn. Like Paul isn't Paul anymore. Like he's this all-knowing being, you know?
The same way Jessica isn't Jessica anymore, you know? Yeah, wow. I agree. I think it is. Like if you can see the path to this victory, you're the temptation is there. Like he's not going to be able to resist it, I feel. This is where it's like the top scene. Do you agree? This is like the scene. So he's walking through the desert, okay? Which I thought this was very cool. We start to see, because we see a few times we see Jessica walking through the desert in this very specific shot.
Yeah.
We kind of see him there now.
Yeah.
It's very similar of that shot we see of Jessica of him following someone through the desert. And at this point we see him and this sandworm like if it's water, right? Like jumps out of the sand behind him.
Yeah.
And he starts walking through the crowd of people and they literally just are like staring at him and parting ways for him. Do you want to talk about this moment? I feel like
I just remember every time I see it, this is one of those things that I remember vividly, and every single time it does not lose any intensity with me.
It's clearly supposed to be biblical, right? This like Christ figure walking through this sea of people, parting the way for him to walk through.
Yeah.
And
it's this beautiful bird's eye shot. Like we see him like arrive and everyone's like, oh shit. Then he starts walking through the crowd and they're like letting him pass and like touching him and stuff. And then they do the bird's eye thing. And there's like hundreds, it has to be, of extras. Like I fully believe this is fully done in camera. Like there's no CG happening. And if it is, it looks great. It's just like, it's another, just the epic, the scale of things is so much bigger than anything you could imagine it being. It's crazy.
And then we see Jessica, who's like full Reverend Mother now, because both these two characters are completely realized. All the power is in Paul's hands now. And he goes into the council. People are praying. Chani's still trying to fight this. She wants Stilgar to stop, and Stilgar just says nothing. And she yells, the prophecies how they enslave us. But Gertie pulls her down. And she says, you don't have any business. And he says, they killed my family. This is all my business. Which it's like, I can see how you would want to do that, you know? And I can see how you could feel like these Fremen, it's not wrong to take these Fremen and lead them to paradise, quote paradise, you know, and stand up against their oppressor. I could see how someone could believe that it's not wrong. And I could see how you could even watch this movie and not think it's wrong. But part of it, again, is because they continue to say that like a Fremen person should lead them. And that's true. Yeah. And it's also like, does Paul even, I don't think Paul believes in the paradise, right? Or does he see it and believe in it?
I think he can see it. I think it's like, when they say paradise, it's not like a fictional place. They just mean like populating Arrakis with like vegetation and stuff.
Yes, and water specifically.
Yeah, which is possible. Is the only reason it's not possible is because everybody uses spice for space travel.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know how like committed he is to making that happen, you know? But I think he thinks it's a place.
And I think part of the problem is when it becomes this quote paradise. The entire Fremen culture is wiped out. This is from the books. This is not from the movie. This is from like the third book. Because basically what happened was people read the first two books, or the first book. First book. Yeah. And everyone was like, yeah, Paul saved these people, right? Everyone who read it. And Frank Herbert was like, no, that's not true at all. Paul did not. He is the bad guy. And so Frank Herbert like continued to write books to like prove that, you know? And that's correct, right?
Yeah, from what I understand.
And Paul goes on to, they do create this paradise and the entire Fremen population is wiped out. The people are gone. The entire Arrakis is a different place. This entire culture of people is gone, unpreserved, completely obliterated, which, right, is like, of course, that is what Paul is leading these people to. That's what it ends up. And I'm guessing he does see this. I mean, he sees the future.
Well, so... yeah, I forget if it's him. I don't think he does it. I think Leto too ends up doing the things.
Yeah, because that is the point. Okay.
But regardless, the other thing I think Gurney sort of silencing Chani, it's again like speaking to the actual selfishness that Paul is led by. Because it's not like he has no state. This is not about the Harkonnens killing his family. This is about Paul being Jesus, you know? Yes. And he can't see that. He can see how his family and his line is affected by this. And yeah, especially on this last watch, I was just like, Gurney, shut up. Right? Like, sorry, but this is not what we're talking about right now.
It's so much bigger.
And exactly, because his mind is like, oh, it's a war council meeting. Let's take down the
Yes.
Harkonnens. But it's not. It's about God coming down and being like, follow me.
And that's what makes Paul the bad guy. Because I don't think Gurney realizes it. I don't think
Exactly.
Gurney understands.
No.
Paul does. Paul
Yeah.
sees everything.
It's much
100%.
less dangerous for Gurney to be selfish.
Yes. So Paul enters and everyone stands. And they're kind of like getting mad at Paul and telling him only that tribe leaders can speak. And
Mhm.
they're still like, and Stilgar says, take my life. It's the only way. And this is where I like cry. Okay. Because Paul says, I'm pointing the way.
That was crazy. I wrote down like he's not playing by the rules anymore,
No.
which is
No.
crazy.
Because he comes in hot, right? And you're right. This is where Jessica even tells him slow it down. But like, again, I think it's like a snowball. His power it's uncontrollable at this point. You know, like there is no slowing down.
But like he's seen the path. Like every move he makes from this point forward, he knows is gonna work, which is just like crazy. And it's again like going back to the beginning of this movie. It sticks with Paul's gonna run in, and now he has the knowledge that that's exactly what he needs to do. You know.
Right.
And Jessica is still hesitant. Like she knows not as much. She can't see the future, but she can see like the past. She has a pretty good idea. Like she's still hesitant. Whereas Paul truly is not now. Like there is no reason to be hesitant. He knows every move that needs to be made, which is so scary.
And then he tells these people, this could be the moment you've been praying for your whole life, which is diabolical. It's borders on evil to say that to these people.
Yeah, for sure.
3 fucking hours ago, Chani said that's how they, for centuries, right? That's what they do is you're going to wait your entire life for this prophet. Yeah. And he's capitalizing on that to such an extreme point, right? Yeah. To say that this could be what you've always wanted. And he basically,
I have nothing else written down because I just wanted to watch this
I stopped writing. Afterwards, I like quickly wrote things down that I wanted to say and remember because I was like, just like literally, you know, when you cry so much that the tears, like your neck is just like soaked, like the tears were streaming completely down my face. And like my shirt was just like, I was crying. Because you see these people and it's just so epic. And it's so, I feel like it's twofold why it's so like emotional is one, the story itself, but two, it's also like good stories like really make me feel emotional. And this is like a story about a good story, you know? And so it's like, it's like so good. And so he begins trying to get these people on his side. So he doesn't have to kill Stilgar. So he can lead these people to paradise, get them on his side. And so
he's still doing it in like that manipulative way. He doesn't say, I'm not going to kill you because I make the rules. He says, you think I would deprive me of the best of us?
Yes, about Stilgar, meaning I would not be foolish enough to take Stilgar.
It's so good.
Which, if anything, Stilgar has been the most vocal person to keep on his side as the prophet.
Like, again, he's showing this like, no, this is about us coming together when it's really just about him fully convincing everyone. It is so evil.
And so what he does is he begins essentially telling these people what they want and what has happened. He like turns to someone, he begins prophesizing about them. And he basically says, I know you want a paradise, right? I know that's what you want. I know your grandmother lost her eye when she was 12 years old. I know when or your great grandmother, I know when this happened, this planet still had the Fremen name Dune. And they all are like,
my God,
start bowing and saying Lisan al Gaib, right? And he goes to someone else and he says, I know you dream of, in your nightmares, you dream of giving water to the dead. Oh my gosh. And then basically he uses his ability where everyone is bowing to him. And then Stilgar says with tears in his hot eyes, what do you see for us? And Paul says, a paradise.
And he just like smiles.
And Stilgar believes it. He believes it and he says, Lisan al Gaib. And Paul pulls out his ring and he says, I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis, and I will lead you to paradise.
And this is why I think Stilgar makes the movie. Because on first viewing, he literally pulls out he says, I'm tricking you. I'm the bad guy. And in the theater, I'm like, let's fucking go. Because Stilgar's on his side.
Yes, exactly.
That's why I think that character alone because the movie's already great. But I feel like that elevates it to such a high level. Like this is such a fascinating story. And to be as epic as it is, to be fully dependent on who these characters are.
Right.
I think this is just one of the best movies ever.
It's so good.
It's so good. Oh shit.
Because again, it doesn't matter what Paul believes. It doesn't matter because these people believe it, you know? And Stilgar believes it. And I feel like Stilgar.
Yeah. Well, Paul doesn't believe in anything. He knows now.
You're right. It doesn't matter. He doesn't. He knows. He knows it's not true. He can literally see that it's not true.
And he's never believed it. Like
No.
every line he said has been like, "It's terrible what you did, Mom. It's terrible
Right.
that this fake story exists." And then he just put on a face for everybody.
Right.
And it's diabolical.
You're so right. He says, "I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis." What do you mean? You just called yourself Atreides, Duke of Arrakis?
Yeah.
You looked all these people in the eye.
And they are eating it up.
And you said, "I am your Duke."
And Gurney's smiling, the fucking asshole.
Right. I feel like I didn't even talk about this scene enough because it's so good. Right? Like, is there anything else you want to say? I just want to watch it again, to be honest.
It's perfect. It's so strong. I
So
think this
well
is
done.
by far the best scene in the movie, which is saying a lot because there's so many good scenes in the movie.
It's so
I also want to say at this
good.
point, I think I have like 5 more sentences written, and then I just started watching the movie.
That's okay. I have it written down. We're good. So basically, we're back to after this like gut-wrenching scene. They kind of we're back to the Emperor, and they realize Paul is alive.
He uses the signet ring to stamp a letter, which is such a fuck you to the Emperor.
It's not even sad. The Fremen make it out. They're perfectly fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you just put this in a vacuum, the movie's not even sad. So we're back to the Emperor, and like you said, he like uses the signet ring. And the Reverend Mother, well, Florence Pugh puts it together. The Reverend Mother counseled the Emperor to attack House Atreides. And she says, "Your father's going to lose the throne no matter who prevails. But there's one way you can save your line. And it's that she will essentially live or marry Paul or Feyd-Rautha, whoever does what wins, right?"
Yeah.
And she says, "Are you prepared?" And Florence Pugh goes, "You've been preparing me all my life." And it's just like, because it's, again, plans on plans on plans.
Yeah.
So this scene between Jessica and Shawnee did not pass the Bechdel test. Sorry, because they talk about Paul. I'm just kidding. It's still a really good movie. You didn't think that was funny, clearly.
No, it was very funny.
Okay. So we have this scene between Jessica and Chani's absolutely mad. And she's going to fight for her people, even though she does not fight for Paul, she says. And we realize they've called the Emperor to Arrakis. And that basically the plan is, it's like bait. They call him to Arrakis, and they're going to storm the same way. They're going to basically storm the Harkonnens and the Emperor. When Vladimir finds out that the Emperor's coming, he says, send a message to the great houses. Their future hangs in the balance.
Which, again, like plans on plans.
Again, yes.
Earlier in the movie, we found out he's like, Feyd-Rautha, I'm going to put you as the Emperor. And he's like, how? And he's like, well, the Emperor helped me kill the Atreides. So if I tell everybody else that happened, they'd be so mad at him. Right. Which is crazy. I also want to take a minute. The Emperor's like ship that he travels in is super cool.
It's like a circle.
It reminds me of the UFO from what is it? The Nope. You know what I'm talking about?
The Jordan Peele movie, Nope, which is one of my favorite horror films.
Just like really how it's all reflective. It was cool.
Yeah.
Like I remember the first scene we see it's just like reflecting, moving, and I was literally just lost in watching. And I was like, none of this is real. This is all just like in a computer. But why I'm enraptured.
The Emperor's like mad at Vladimir, saying like.
We also haven't talked about this. I think Christopher Walken did a good job as the Emperor.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's hard to not see Christopher Walken, but I don't think he did anything weird. Like I think it was fine.
I feel like maybe they could have done something different with his hair. I don't know. I do agree. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it is weird because it very much feels like Christopher Walken. But I guess Paul feels like Timothée Chalamet. So
I guess so. I also think they do this thing where there were a lot of very specific accents throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like the amalgamation of like all of Earth culture coming together and then spreading out, you know. So some people had like borderline like Irish accents for whatever reason. So I think Christopher Walken having a very distinctive speech pattern like weirdly fit in the world because so many other people also do.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me that things don't really make sense. Like why Paul doesn't have any tinge of a British accent, you know, like or like why Chani and Paul have the same accent. Like it doesn't bother me because it's like whatever. That's so not the point.
For sure. So I just want to say every time, because I remember before I saw the movie, people were criticizing that, and I was like, whatever, yo. There's bigger things to talk about.
Yeah. So the Emperor is basically mad because the Harkonnens thought the South was uninhabitable, but they're like, the Emperor's like, no, it shows signs of life, and the Muad'Dib is still alive. Stilgar he's calling a sandworm. Stilgar's calling a sandworm. He's on a dune. And we pan over to the House Atreides flag behind him.
It is scary. It is scary to see that.
And this is where it's like Paul walks onto this cliff.
Yeah.
All the cinematography feels this, right? Like it's religious. It's like Paul's a different person. And he's speaking to the group on this cliff. The theme is playing.
Yeah. Well, it's this grand epic sweeping stuff, but now it's got such a sinister connotation to it. Like it's wild. You've got everyone dressed up in armor that's not theirs.
Right.
It's really crazy.
And I feel like it's these people, part of what make the Fedaykin and the Fremen such strong fighters is the faith they have, you know? Because it's like the Sardaukar who work for the Emperor, they don't believe in something. You know, they're not using something to fuel their need to stay alive, their need to win, their need to fight the other person so others can continue on.
Yeah.
You know, they're just doing what their job is essentially. And it feels so, it's like perverted and like bastardized. You know what I'm saying? That Paul takes this faith these people have in this belief and uses that to make them stronger fighters.
Yeah.
So he can just do exactly what the Emperor is doing, you know? Very, very cool. So this is where like the battle begins, and we see like the three worms emerge through the storm cloud. Like Stilgar is riding a worm into battle. The theme is playing. Like
the Sardaukar are running in fear.
And it keeps showing shots of Jessica walking through the desert in slow motion like earlier. Or sorry, it keeps showing Paul walking through the desert in slow motion like earlier, the way Jessica was walking through the desert, because it's him now. They're following him through the desert. He is the person. And Vladimir's like trying to crawl away.
Yeah, they like cut him off of his flying machine thing because they're like mad at him.
And Paul is leading the people covered in blood through the dust, and he gets to where the Emperor is inside. Because they've done it. It doesn't even look hard for the Fremen.
No. Well, like so many things happen. Like Paul called the Emperor there at that moment because he knows a storm is coming.
Yes.
And then they use the missiles, the like family warheads, to blow up some rocks for the storm to pass through and for the worms to get in. And it's just like, it's this plan that you're like, oh, he like for real sees the future. Like this went off without a hitch. Like I wonder how many people they even lost, you know?
Right. Because also it's like Vladimir called the great houses, right? Like things like that he wanted the great houses there, you know?
Exactly.
It's all so planned at this point. So Paul walks up to Vladimir and he calls him grandfather, then stabs him and says, you die like an animal.
With the Chris knife.
And he says, you die like an animal.
It's crazy. The lack of empathy in that line.
The lack of any fear. Because next what happens is Paul walks the Emperor. The Sardaukar have knives on him. Paul's 6 inches away from these swords. And he's not even scared. And he basically says, like, give Vladimir's body to the desert. And Sardaukar still have swords and weapons. And Paul says, like, okay, take the prisoners.
And kill all the Sardaukar.
Casually. Right. Casually, because he's like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Like, they literally still have their weapons out. They aren't taken yet.
No.
He just knows it's going to happen because there's no fear. He leaves. He knows. Gurney's covered in blood. He's destroying the Harkonnens because that's what he wanted. He calls Dave Bautista's character Reuben, and battles him one-on-one, quickly kills him. And he says, for my friends and my duke.
I thought that was cool. I liked the speed of the battle.
So he just did it, you know? And the sun sets on Vladimir's body being eaten by bugs.
Yeah.
In the desert.
It's good.
And the great houses arrive.
It's really good.
Chani tells Paul it isn't over yet.
Well, I thought this was cool too, because I don't think this is in the movie. What I actually think I'm thinking of is Josh Brolin as Thanos in Avengers.
Okay.
When he's like, when he has the Infinity Stones, and they're like, what are you going to do after you like do your thing, after you kill half the people? And I think he says something like, watch the sunrise on a thankful universe.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a weird, like, cross movie parallel. Like, you're watching the sun set on this like absolute massacre that you've just created, leading to a much larger, longer massacre. I like, very specific to me. I just thought it was like neat.
No, that's cool. I feel like because it is like planetary, where it's very
exactly,
space is very important, and they
like
very
we're entering
much,
a dark period. The sun is going down.
They very much multiple times do they use things like, I mean, the movie started with an eclipse and ends on a sunset. See what I mean? They use this so effectively, and it doesn't get old. You know, it's very like it represents moments like Paul dying, the end of a house, right? Yeah. The sun is very important. And part of that is because like the heat from Arrakis, I would think, and what you see what I'm saying, and what that means for this planet. So Paul says to Chani, I want you to know I will love you as long as I breathe. I believe him.
I
believe him. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I feel like maybe you should tell her now what you're about to do. I feel like now is not the best time, but it's better than what you do a second later. So Paul says, tell the great houses that if they attack, the Atreides arsenal will destroy Arrakis. And the spice fields. Yeah. Sorry, yes, the spice field. And this is where I think the Bene Gesserit, the Reverend Mother, realizes it's out of her control. I think she felt like she had everything under control, and this is where it's gone, because this is where everyone speaks up and it's like, you don't know what you're doing. What are you talking about? Yeah. And this is where he says silence on the Reverend Mother, and she calls him an abomination. So I think that's what it is. And she says it
softly, so it like kind of works. Like he uses the voice, and it kind of works on the Reverend Mother, and you're like, holy shit.
And this is where Paul says he's going to take the Emperor's daughter's hand in marriage, but the Emperor has to answer for Leto. And this is where the Emperor says, you know why I killed him? Your father was meek, or he was a weak man. So Paul's going to duel against Feyd-Rautha, who as the champion for the Emperor. And Feyd-Rautha is obviously using a Harkonnen blade, and Paul is using a crysknife. And I point that out because it's like clearly very important. It's to this, like the blades they're using, they focus on it a lot.
Yeah. Paul gives the may my knife chip and shatter
with the Atreides hand movement,
which is super fucking cool. Which is like, again, like just more layers. Like he's saying the Fremen battle cry as he does the Atreides. It's just very cool. Like he's at some level still struggling with like who he really is, right? You know? Which is very cool.
And Feyd-Rautha just laughs and says it back to him. And I thought this was it was very, very good. So then they start fighting, and this fight is, I feel like, one of the best fight scenes. We like have talked about it a little bit, but
they do a similar thing like when he fought Jamis. Like the music cuts out. It is just like sound design for days.
Yeah.
There's no shields. They don't have shields, which is crazy.
It looks like Paul is winning at first, but also it looks like he's scrambling at the same time. You know? And I think it was really well done. Obviously, like the choreography itself, the speed.
My stomach's still in knots, and I'm like, I know what I've seen this happen at least 3 times now, and I'm still like, oh, I wonder what happened.
I know. And it's just like hands are moving everywhere. They're moving back and forth. They're breathing heavy. I think part of it is like the acting is so strong too. Yeah. And at one point, Feyd-Rautha stabs Paul. Paul is like on the ground, or he takes him to the ground.
Yeah.
Feyd-Rautha sees Chani, which is like...
Well, we pan to like every character we've met, like with the first inkling of doubt rushing into their face, which is just crazy. You're right,
because we see Jessica being worried, and we see Florence, or we see the Emperor's daughter seeing Chani, you know?
We see Gurney being like, why does he take risks before? And Stilgar just goes, because he leads the way. And then we see both of their reactions to him getting stabbed in the stomach.
Everyone's just holding their breath. So then Feyd-Rautha does stab Paul, But Paul, does he stab him with his own knife? Is that what it is? The Harkonnen knife or with the Chris knife?
I'm not sure which knife.
I think it's I don't remember. I felt like it was important.
What are you asking?
Because what happens is, so Feyd-Rautha takes his knife and points it at, that's the Harkonnen knife.
Yes.
Points at Paul. Paul like grabs it. But Paul is stabbed, correct? At this point with his own knife, the Chris knife.
Okay, yes.
Right?
Yeah, I think he takes that knife out.
Right.
And sticks it. Yeah.
Right. He's like holding the knife back.
Which is, looking back on the scene, it's crazy. Because there's not a jerky motion about it. Like, he grabs the sword, which means he slowly pulls the knife out and slowly puts it in the Feyd-Rautha. Like,
I might be wrong. Okay, yeah, hold on.
Solidifying again that like he sees every movement that has happened and needs to happen, you know?
Okay, no, we're right. Sorry, I had to check. We're right. So, because he has the Harkonnen knife like in his own chest, which is crazy. So then everyone, once he like wins and Feyd-Rautha like falls over, everyone like lets go of their breath. Like, it's really good. Everyone is like, was clearly holding their breath. And Stilgar says, Lisan al-Gaib. Paul takes the knife out of his own chest. And he looks at Chani. He's holding the bloody Harkonnen knife. And this is where Jessica, like in the Reverend's mother's mind, says, you chose the wrong side. And she's like, side, you of all people should know there are no sides.
And calls her Reverend Mother.
Yes. And then says Reverend Mother. Which is so good because that is how the Bene Gesserit see it. Like, there are no sides. You know, there's power and control.
Yeah.
And that's what these people use. And it's all about, don't you agree?
Yeah.
So Florence Pugh's character, the Emperor's daughter, wants him to spare the Emperor. She says, I'll be your willing bride. But he makes like, the Emperor kisses Atreides' ring and they all bow except Chani and the Emperor's daughter. And like it's really cool because everyone's bowed. Chani and the Emperor's daughter are across from each other and Paul's in the center. And he's like looking at his two paths almost. And Chani just leaves.
Yeah.
Because it's not an option anymore. It's gone. And the great houses have refused Paul's ascension, right? Which is why it starts,
all
right?
part of Paul's plan.
Right. All part of this war to begin. And I think it's Stilgar says, I think it is. He says, we await your orders, Lisan al-Gaib. And Paul, for the last thing Paul says is lead them to paradise.
And they board the ships, waving the Atreides flag.
Stilgar says one last time, Lisan al-Gaib. And Jessica says, tells her baby, the holy war begins.
And she is pumped about it.
And then we cut to Chani. It ends on Chani, which is the embodiment of Arrakis.
Staying on OG Arrakis, sandworm riding.
In tears.
Yeah.
Planning to ride away. Right? You see this embodiment of Arrakis.
Yeah.
Because Arrakis lost today. You know, the Fremen won, Paul won, but Arrakis lost.
Yeah.
At what cost did it take?
Well, and Chani saw the beauty of Arrakis, and Arrakis is now different.
Yes.
You know? Because we did like what we've been setting up to the whole time. Like, this whole battle scene was so easy because Paul fully harnessed all the power of the desert, right? We had worms going off. We had all the Fremen fighting. We had all these things. Like, we've been talking about it for 2 movies now, and to see it totally come to fruition, but in that it is no longer what it was, is really strong. So
strong. And I feel like we talked a lot about the theme and stuff like that. And I feel like it is clear, but I also totally could see how you could watch it and not see how clear it is, especially if you are just watching it like one time through.
Yeah. Well, and I think they purposely do that. They purposely give you opportunities to like be on Paul's side, because he's who you're following. He's fighting the Harkonnens, who are evil as shit, you know?
Yeah, right. He's painted in every way the good guy.
And when you see these abused, mistreated people so happy being abused and mistreated, it's easy to think like maybe he's actually right. Like, it's good.
Right.
You know?
And I think without Chani's character, because when you look at Chani's character, that's when you realize he's wrong. And that's the purpose she serves. Yeah. You know?
It's crazy. Like, everybody who talks about Dune says this, but it is amazing that it came out in the 60s for how just complexly detailed it is.
Relevant.
And how relevant it can be.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I don't know. I said it in passing through tears. I think this is probably one of my all-time favorite movies.
I would put it up there as mine too.
I think it's got everything I look for, not only in terms of like a story that is 10 out of 10, knock it out of the park, full of deep, rich characters, great motivation. It's an epic. It's telling something so much bigger than itself. The themes are so strong in both in obvious and non-obvious ways.
Mhm.
I just think from beginning to end, I was fully enraptured in what was happening.
Yeah.
And the scope of it, the world building, all these motivations happening. It's just such a perfect story.
Mhm. And I know we talked about casting before, but I think something else that goes into this, like as a viewer, you could be tricked as well,
Mhm.
is Timothée Chalamet is so likable
Yes.
as a person, and so many people like him, and he seems so youthful and sweet. And
Mhm.
I think it's just really good casting, because it's like you don't want to call him the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't feel right calling him the bad guy. And I think it's really well done. And I think that was a smart choice. And I think Zendaya being Chani was a smart choice as well, because you like her so much too, that it does help you have that like reasonable doubt that okay, wait, he isn't, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
The only other thing I want to say is this, like, the Bene Gesserits, we talked a little bit about how the prophecy being vague, how they can use language to control the prophecy.
Mhm.
And I think it's very cool to see Jessica do that. As she becomes this, like, stronger, as Paul becomes stronger, she uses the voice more and more.
Yeah.
And starts controlling people more and more. And I think this idea of like controlling people with words is so cool, because then Paul starts to do it too.
Mhm.
And it culminates in him silencing the Reverend Mother.
Yeah.
Using his own voice. He is the only voice of the prophecy at that point.
And you sort of see the parallel, right? The voice was written as this idea of how politicians
Mhm.
control. And you see him not even using the voice, but convincing the war crowd of people to follow him into his war that he's doing.
Right. And it's not just because it does so much represent like propaganda and being able to control people. And we see Paul do that. It is propaganda. He literally is able to use people. But I think it also, the specificity or lack thereof in language helps to create control for Bene Gesserits.
Yeah.
Right? They're very clever in what they do. And being able to choose their narrative and choose the words they use
Mhm.
helps them, like we talked about in the movie of Dune 1, how they're able to do that. And I think we saw it in this movie too, you know,
Yeah.
where the words that Jessica uses are very specific, and she can easily control people with them because of her choice of the words she's using.
Yeah.
And I would say that's like an important theme in this story.
I would agree.
It's all very, very good. Do you have anything else you want to say?
About this movie specifically, I think we've said a lot of it. It came out this year, but I feel like a lot of people have seen it already. Being fresh in the Dune mindset, I hope the Dune Prophecies is good. I hope it's good. There's so much to work with the Bene Gesserit. I think not having Paul in the game is going to make it feel very different, you know, because I don't know, it's set like very early on, right?
Yeah, it's like thousands of years ago.
So I don't know. I feel like if they go at the arc of like, oh, from day one, we're talking about the Kwisatz Haderach and things like that, I don't know if that's going to be the strongest move. I also think they could easily fall victim to trying to emulate the whisper acting that happens in the movie, which I think just won't play very well in TV.
I agree.
But I've got high hopes. I hope it's good. I really do. Because Dune is one of those things where if it's not really good, all the world building and all the tech and all the lore is real boring, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I also have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
One question. So we'll be talking about Dune Prophecies as it comes out. That's the show that's happening. But the director of Dune 1 and 2 has gone on stating that they will be making a 3rd movie. What do you think the 3rd movie is going to be about?
Okay, so here's the thing, because the 2nd book is not the war. It skips the war, right? Which is, I like had sort of a mental, like, I couldn't come to terms with it, like understanding how it skips the war. When I found out, like, I left the theaters of Dune 2, so I was like, what the fuck is the next one about, right? Because this was kind of where the story was supposed to end. And they want to make the 3rd movie, which I do think they should. I don't know how they're going to do it, because I think it's going to be the story of the next book with flashbacks to the war or something. It's kind of where what I landed on my thoughts. I don't know the second book, but it's about the, like, aftermath, right? I think it's even
Yeah.
set later on.
I think it is. I think it's like 30 years or something in the future.
So I don't
like Paul is the emperor, and I think his whole thing is that he is very paranoid about losing his seat now. So that's what it's about. I really don't know. So I was curious.
Yeah, that's what my guess would be. It's
Okay.
interesting. I mean, it's going to be a while before we get it, but
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Because I think focusing on after the war isn't a bad idea, but I definitely want to see some of the war. I don't know if this happens or not, but I feel like Stilgar dying in the war could be very emotional.
True.
You know?
Yes.
Because that could be the turning point from like, oh, he's evil to everyone knows he's obviously evil.
Yes.
You know, when you lose that connection. Then my other question is a little more lighthearted. How do you get off of a sandworm?
I don't care, is what I decided. Anytime anyone has asked the question, how do we get the palanquin? Jessica was on the sand. I don't care. I don't give a shit because I want to believe this story. I enjoy it. It's really, really good. And it doesn't matter to me. I think probably they can control the sandworm. So
they just slow it down.
Right. They slow it down.
Yeah.
They press the brake pedal
Exactly.
and they hop off. I would think. I bet it's just as chaotic as how they get on. You know?
Could be. I don't know, because they show when the battle started, they had the worms like up in the air for a second and then they came down. Maybe they can like slow down the worms and like have them almost stop.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Because I always just assumed they would ride and then they would just like find a spot to raise up and jump off. But then they brought the palanquin on. And I'm like, wait a minute.
How the hell do you have that palanquin on there?
I think that's probably the best answer. Who cares?
Right.
That's really good. Okay. Do you have any quote you want to end with? There's so many.
Yeah, there are so many. This is when they're talking about the desert mouse. And Stilgar says more to it. So Stilgar says, he like shushes them and he says, this is him calling his name. He said, Muad'Dib is wise in the ways of the desert. Muad'Dib makes his own water. The constellation in the stars that points to the north, which we also call Muad'Dib, shows us the way. Muad'Dib, that is a powerful name.
That's really good.
And that's where you get the points the way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And it's like, did Paul know that? At this point, I think he thought he was truly Fremen.
Yeah.
I think he just,
I think so.
I don't know if he realized like the power of what he was doing. But again, you can ask yourself,
how much did Stilgar doctor it almost?
Would Stilgar have found meaning in anything he said? Because part of it is he had these visions of the desert mouse with Chani and things like that. And yeah, so I think it kind of encapsulates this idea of like happenstance and manipulating things to fit the prophecy, but also it like almost feeling real. Yeah, you know, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Would watch again. Probably will watch again.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked our commentary or you didn't like it, let us know by commenting on wherever you are watching / listening. The best part about this show is getting to interact with other people who are fans of the same stuff, getting to talk theories and ideas and art. It is really cool how many people we've already been able to contact and how many great ideas we've been able to sort of talk about. So that's been super awesome. Be on the lookout for our episodes about Dune Prophecy as they come out. It is releasing as of this recording. The first episode comes out tomorrow, right?
Yeah, the 17th.
The 17th. So we will try to be on it with our weekly uploads talking about the show. Again, I have high hopes. I hope it's good.
I hope it is too.
I'm just so nervous.
I'm nervous too. I'm worried it's not going to be.
But if you want to hear our opinion on it, come back to the channel, come back to the page. Thanks again for listening. The best way to spread the word is to spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your family, share us on social media. Everything helps to grow and support what we're trying to do, which is just sharing good art that is good.
Yeah.
Until next time, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been Welcome to the Writer's Room. See you in the next one.
I didn't cry as much as I thought I would.